Add one more rod when targeting big fish, and double your chance of catching one. Fellow anglers must have heard the saying, "A veteran uses one rod, a novice scatters rods all over the place." This phrase has two meanings. First, experienced anglers keep their gear simple, while newbies always carry loads of bags and equipment. The second meaning is literal. Veterans often fish with a single rod, while novices use two or three, like setting up a street stall. Many anglers avoid using two rods for fear of being called novices. Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a novice. If you catch fish, it just proves that this novice is better than the veterans. If you don't, you've got an excuse. I don't care much about others' opinions, I'd rather let the catch speak for itself. Besides, fishing is all about fun. What matters is enjoying yourself. Over the years, I only use a single rod when catching small bait fish or fishing for crucian carp with a long rod and short line. Otherwise, I prefer fishing with two rods. Some anglers might use 3 or 4 rods, but I don't like that. Too many rods are a hassle to carry and store, disturb others, and most importantly, if you hook a big fish, it might get tangled with the others. What a nuisance. 2 rods are perfect. You can fish with one on the left and one on the right, one in front and one behind, or even one fishing the bottom and the other floating. Using 2 rods can, to some extent, prevent others from poaching your spot, allow you to use 2 different techniques, and boost efficiency, greatly reducing the chance of going home empty-handed. Summer and autumn are prime seasons for big fish, but more often than not, landing them requires long hours of waiting. On a good day, you might get 1 or 2 bites. On a bad day, there might be none at all, or even no action for days on end. This is when using 2 rods helps. It will at least greatly reduce the probability of catching 0 fish. You can use one rod to wait for big fish and the other to catch smaller ones, keeping you from getting bored and making it less likely to end up with 0 fish. If you only care about big fish, use one rod for grass carp and the other for carp, or one for carp and the other for silver carp and bighead carp. It's entirely up to you. Even when targeting a single species, say carp, you can use 2 different methods with different baits, letting the fish choose whichever they prefer. Let me share some tips using 2 rods for the same species. First, let's clarify the pros and cons. The biggest downside of 2 rods is the risk of line tangling when a fish is hooked. We have solutions for this, though. For example, big fish give away their presence with bubbles, nudges against the line, tentative pecks, or a sudden lull in small fish activity. When you notice these signs, quickly reel in the other rod. Another tip is to use rods of different lengths and cast them far apart. For instance, use a long rod to fish the left front of the bait area and a short rod for the right rear, both near the edge of the bait area. This way, the distances and since big fish usually start feeding at the edge of the bait area, there's no need to worry. Using rods of different lengths also covers varying distances and depths, increasing your chances. After all, you never know which direction the fish will enter the bait area from. For underwater ridges, 2 rods of different lengths can cover both above and below the ridge. If the rods are of different lengths, use lines of different thicknesses too. One thicker line for a slack setup focused on wading, and a relatively thinner line for normal float adjustment. Corn is the most common chum for big fish, and that's a solid choice. In summer, use fermented old corn. Homemade is cheaper, but commercial options like West Wind work too, so I won't elaborate. A rule for chumming: use less for short trips, more for long-term use. More in productive waters, less in scarce ones. You don't have to stick to corn. Wheat or pellets work too, depending on the fish activity. For bait, use commercial bait and corn, old, fresh, or soaked. Since we usually use double hooks for platform fishing, put old corn on one hook and fresh corn on the other. When using corn for stationary fishing, pair it with thick lines, big hooks, and a slack setup. For commercial bait, use a suspended float or a slack setup. No need to overcomplicate float adjustment for big fish. When the water is flowing, use commercial bait on the upstream rod and corn on the downstream one. Don't leave the commercial bait untouched. Change it every 3 to 5 minutes. Its strong scent and spread downstream with the current, luring fish to the corn, and the bait too. If the water is still, check the wind. Strong winds create currents, so use the same logic and method. If it's calm, the rod's placement doesn't matter. Friendly reminder: when using 2 rods, attach an emergency rope to both. After all, big fish bites are rare, and you can't watch them constantly. Sometimes you fish carefully all day with no luck, but when you're about to pack up and let your focus slip, a fish might drag the rod away. It's unpredictable. In recent years, I've used rods with reels more often. My main rod is still a hand rod, but I'll place a sea rod nearby. As long as the reel spool is open for smooth line release, you won't fear big fish sneaking in attack. With the reel's help, you'll feel confident facing a giant, though reeling in is less fun than with a hand rod. Author profile: I'm a fishing enthusiast and self-media blogger who loves sharing tips. Follow me, and we'll exchange fishing skills and chat about all things wild fishing. Like, save, and follow. Never miss an update.